The accusation came like a thunderclap on a clear day, and Emma Nelson found herself standing in the middle of Bentonville's Main Street with a crowd of angry faces surrounding her, their voices rising in a cacophony of blame and judgment that made her head spin. "She stole Mrs. Henderson's diamond brooch," someone shouted from the growing mob, and Emma felt her heart hammering against her ribcage as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Just moments ago, she had been walking back from the general store with her modest purchases, minding her own business in this Arkansas town where she had arrived only 3 weeks prior, hoping to start fresh after her father's death had left her with nothing but debts and sorrow back in Missouri. Now she stood accused of theft, a crime she had not committed, and the hostile faces around her suggested they had already made up their minds about her guilt. "I did not take anything," Emma said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound steady. "I have never stolen a single thing in my entire life." "Then why did Sarah Johnson see you coming out of the Henderson house this morning?" demanded a portly man with a thick mustache, his face red with indignation. "Mrs. Henderson discovered her brooch missing just an hour later." "I was delivering laundry," Emma protested, her hands clutching the fabric of her worn cotton dress. "Mrs. Henderson hired me to wash and mend some of her linens. I dropped them off at the back door, just as she asked me to do." The crowd pressed closer, and Emma felt genuine fear beginning to take root in her chest. She had heard stories about frontier justice, about how quickly things could turn violent when people's emotions ran high. The year was 1882, and while Bentonville was a growing town with pretensions of civilization, it was still part of the wild frontier where the law was sometimes more suggestion than absolute rule. "Maybe we should search her," suggested a thin woman with a pinched expression. "The brooch might be hidden in her belongings." "Now hold on just 1 minute." A deep voice cut through the noise, and the crowd parted slightly as a tall man pushed his way through to stand beside Emma. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn leather vest over a blue cotton shirt, his dark hair slightly too long beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His jaw was strong and clean-shaven, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds as they swept over the assembled townspeople, with an expression that managed to be both calm and somehow threatening. "Since when does Bentonville conduct trials in the middle of the street without a single shred of evidence?" "This is none of your concern, Harrison Rourke," the portly man said, though his tone had lost some of its aggressive edge. "This woman is a thief." "That woman has a name, Mayor Collins," Harrison said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of steel. "And unless you have proof of wrongdoing beyond someone seeing her do exactly what she was hired to do, I suggest you all go about your business and let the sheriff handle this properly." Emma found herself staring at this stranger who had stepped forward to defend her. Harrison Rourke stood at least 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man who spent his days working cattle and riding across rough country. There was something in his bearing that commanded respect, a quiet authority that made even the mayor take a step backward. "The sheriff is out of town," Mayor Collins said stiffly. "He will not return until tomorrow evening at the earliest." "Then I reckon this young lady deserves the courtesy of waiting until he gets back before you form a lynch mob," Harrison replied, his tone conversational but his eyes hard as flint. "Or has Bentonville decided to abandon the rule of law entirely?" A murmur ran through the crowd, and Emma could see doubt beginning to creep into some of the faces around her. Mayor Collins looked frustrated, his jowls quivering with suppressed anger, but he seemed unwilling to challenge Harrison directly. "Fine," the mayor said at last. "But she does not leave town, and someone needs to keep an eye on her to make sure she does not try to sell that brooch or flee with it." "I will vouch for her," Harrison said without hesitation. "She can stay at my ranch until the sheriff returns and this matter is properly investigated." Emma's breath caught in her throat. This stranger was offering to take responsibility for her, to bring her to his home and stand as her guarantor. It was an act of extraordinary kindness and faith from someone who did not know her at all. "I cannot ask you to do that," Emma said quietly, finding her voice at last. "You do not even know me." Harrison turned to look at her, and she found herself caught by those gray eyes that seemed to see right through to her soul. "I know innocent when I see it," he said simply. "And I know a railroading when it is happening in front of me. My ranch is about 5 miles west of town. You will be safe there until this gets sorted out properly." The crowd was already beginning to disperse, people drifting away now that the immediate drama had been diffused. Mayor Collins gave Emma one last suspicious look before turning on his heel and stalking back toward his office. Within minutes, the street had returned to its normal flow of activity, though Emma could still feel curious and judgmental eyes upon her from windows and doorways. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know why you helped me, but I am grateful." "My horse is tied up outside the saloon," Harrison said, gesturing down the street. "Do you have belongings that need to be collected?" "Just a small trunk at the boarding house," Emma replied. "I have been staying there since I arrived in Bentonville. Mrs. Parker, the landlady, will probably be relieved to see me go after all this trouble." Harrison nodded and began walking, and Emma fell into step beside him, acutely aware of the stares following them. He moved with a natural grace, his long strides eating up the distance, and she had to hurry slightly to keep pace. They collected her trunk from the boarding house, where Mrs. Parker did indeed seem eager to be rid of her, and Harrison secured it to his saddle with practiced efficiency. His horse was a handsome bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Harrison mounted up, then reached down to offer Emma his hand. She hesitated for just a moment before accepting, and he pulled her up behind him with surprising ease. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep her balance, and she was immediately conscious of the solid warmth of him, the strength in his frame. "Hold on tight," Harrison said over his shoulder, and then they were moving, the horse settling into an easy lope that carried them out of town and into the rolling countryside beyond. Emma had never been this close to a man who was not family, and she felt her face heating despite the October breeze that cooled her cheeks. Harrison smelled of leather and wood smoke, and something else she could not quite identify, something masculine and not unpleasant. She focused on the landscape around them, trying to distract herself from her awareness of him. The Arkansas countryside was beautiful in the autumn, with trees showing touches of gold and crimson against the green. The land rolled gently, with patches of forest interspersed with open meadows and fields. They followed a well-worn trail that wound through the hills, and after about 45 minutes of riding, they crested a rise, and Emma caught her first glimpse of Harrison's ranch. It was a modest spread, with a sturdy log house that looked like it had been built with care and skill. There was a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals where she could see horses grazing. The property had a well-maintained look to it, everything neat and in its proper place. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, suggesting someone was home and tending the fire. As they rode into the yard, the front door opened, and a woman in her early 50s stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. She had graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a weathered face that spoke of years spent under the prairie sun. Her eyes were sharp and assessing as they took in Emma perched behind Harrison on the horse. "You have brought home a guest, I see," the woman said, her tone neutral but curious. "This is Miss Emma Nelson," Harrison said as he dismounted and then helped Emma down. "She is having some trouble in town and needs a place to stay for a couple of days until the sheriff gets back." "Emma, this is Martha Green. She keeps house for me and makes sure this place does not fall into complete chaos." Martha's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "What kind of trouble?" "The false accusation kind," Harrison replied, his tone indicating he did not want to discuss it in detail. "She needs a safe place to stay, and I told the town I would vouch for her." "Did you now?" Martha said, but there was no criticism in her voice, only a kind of resigned amusement. "Well, bring her inside then. She looks half frozen, and supper will be ready within the hour." Emma followed Harrison and Martha into the house, her arms wrapped around herself against the chill that had seeped into her bones during the ride. The interior of the cabin was warm and welcoming, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and furniture that was simple but well made. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a long wooden table, comfortable chairs, and shelves lined with books and supplies. Doorways led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. "There is a spare room at the back," Martha said, already moving toward it. "It is small, but it has a good bed and it is warm. You can stay there as long as you need." "Thank you," Emma said, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. "I will try not to be any trouble." "You let me worry about that," Martha replied, her tone brisk but not unkind. "For now, why do not you wash up and then come join us for supper? You look like you have not had a proper meal in days." The small room Martha showed her to was indeed cozy, with a narrow bed covered in a thick quilt, a simple dresser, and a window that looked out toward the barn. Emma's trunk had already been brought in, and she sank down on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the day's events pressing down on her. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried when her father died, and she had not cried when she had been forced to sell everything they owned to pay his debts. She would not cry now, even though she felt more lost and alone than she ever had in her life. After washing her face and hands in the basin provided and attempting to tidy her appearance, Emma made her way back to the main room. Harrison was standing by the fireplace, and he had removed his vest and hat. In the warm glow of the lamplight, she could see that he was probably in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. There were fine lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he spent a lot of time squinting into the sun, and his hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. "Feeling better?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been in town. "Yes, thank you," Emma replied. "I do not know how I can ever repay you for what you did today. You risked your reputation to help a complete stranger." Harrison shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I did what anyone decent would have done." "That mob was ready to condemn you without a trial or even a proper investigation. It was not right." "Not everyone would have seen it that way," Emma said softly. "Many people would have just walked on by." Before Harrison could respond, Martha called them to the table. The meal was simple but hearty. Venison stew with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Emma discovered she was ravenous, having been too anxious to eat much that day, and she cleaned her plate while Martha and Harrison made easy conversation about the ranch and the work that needed to be done before winter set in. "We have about 30 head of cattle right now," Harrison was saying, "and I am planning to buy some more breeding stock in the spring. The land here is good for grazing, and there is plenty of water. I think we could support a much larger herd eventually." "You will need more hands if you expand," Martha observed. "You cannot manage a big operation all by yourself." "I know," Harrison agreed. I have been thinking about hiring on another cowhand or two when the time comes. For now, I manage well enough with occasional help from some of the neighbors." Emma listened to this exchange, trying to piece together a picture of Harrison Rourke's life. He was clearly a hard-working man who had built something substantial for himself out here on the Arkansas frontier. He spoke with quiet confidence about his plans and his ambitions, and she found herself impressed by his determination and his vision for the future. After supper, Martha shooed them both out of the kitchen so she could clean up, and Harrison invited Emma to sit by the fire. The evening had grown cold, and the flames felt wonderful against her skin. "Tell me what really happened today," Harrison said once they were settled. "I want to hear your side of the story." Emma took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the morning. She explained how she had taken on various jobs around town to support herself, doing laundry and mending and whatever other work she could find. Mrs. Henderson had hired her 3 days ago to wash and repair some damaged linens, and Emma had returned the finished work that morning, leaving the bundle at the back door as instructed because Mrs. Henderson had been out. "I never went inside the house," Emma said firmly. "I knocked, and when no one answered, I left the laundry in the basket by the door, just as Mrs. Henderson told me to do if she was not home. I did not see anything valuable, and I certainly did not take anything that was not mine." "Who is Sarah Johnson, and why would she say she saw you coming out of the house?" Harrison asked, his brow furrowed in thought. "Sarah works as a maid for the Henderson family," Emma replied. "I have spoken to her a few times, but I would not say we are friends. She always seemed to look down on me a bit, like I was beneath her somehow. I do not know why she would lie about seeing me leave the house, unless she made an honest mistake about the timing. Or unless she had a reason to want you blamed," Harrison suggested quietly. Emma stared at him. "You think she might have taken the brooch herself?" "I am saying it is worth considering all possibilities," Harrison said. "A lot of times, the person who is quickest to point the finger is the one with the most to hide, but we will have to wait for the sheriff to investigate properly. In the meantime, you are safe here." The simple reassurance in his words made something tight in Emma's chest begin to loosen. She had been so alone for so long, dealing with everything by herself, that having someone stand beside her felt almost miraculous. "Why did you help me?" Emma asked suddenly. "You did not know me. You had no reason to believe I was innocent." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "About 5 years ago, my younger brother was accused of horse theft. He was innocent, but the accusers were powerful men, and nobody wanted to stand up for him. He was hanged before anyone bothered to investigate properly. 3 months later, the real thieves were caught, and it came out that my brother had nothing to do with it. By then, of course, it was too late." Emma felt her throat tighten with sympathy. "I am so sorry." "His name was Henry," Harrison continued. "He was only 20 years old with his whole life ahead of him. He died because people were too quick to judge and too eager to believe the worst. When I saw that crowd surrounding you today, I saw my brother all over again. I could not just walk away and let it happen to someone else." "Thank you," Emma whispered, "for seeing me, for believing in me." Harrison turned to look at her, and in the firelight, his gray eyes seemed to hold depths she was only beginning to understand. "You are welcome, Emma Nelson. Now try to get some rest. Tomorrow we will figure out how to clear your name properly." Emma retired to her small room shortly after, exhausted in body and spirit. She lay in the comfortable bed, staring up at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. She had come to Bentonville hoping for a fresh start, a chance to build a new life for herself. Instead, she had found herself accused of theft and dependent on the charity of strangers. But what strangers they were. Harrison Rourke had stepped forward to defend her when no one else would, driven by his own painful history and a sense of justice that seemed to be part of his core character. And Martha, with her practical kindness and her willingness to open her home to an accused thief, showed a generosity of spirit that Emma found humbling. She fell asleep thinking about gray eyes and quiet strength, and about the way Harrison had looked when he talked about his brother. Grief and determination mingled in his expression. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost sparkling on the grass outside Emma's window. She dressed quickly and made her way to the main room where she found Martha already up and preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Martha said cheerfully. "I hope you slept well. Harrison has already been up for hours. He is out checking on the livestock, but he will be back soon for breakfast." "Is there anything I can do to help?" Emma asked, feeling awkward standing idle while Martha worked. "You can set the table if you like," Martha replied, gesturing toward a cupboard. "The plates are in there and the silverware is in the drawer below." Emma set about the task, grateful to have something useful to do. By the time she had the table ready, Harrison came stamping in through the door, bringing a gust of cold air with him. His cheeks were ruddy from the wind, and his hair was slightly disheveled, giving him a boyish look that contrasted with his usual serious demeanor. "Morning," he said, pulling off his gloves and hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "It is cold enough to freeze the tail off a brass monkey out there. We are going to need to bring the horses into the barn if it gets much colder tonight." They sat down to a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and thick slices of toasted bread spread with butter and jam. The food was delicious, and Emma found herself relaxing into the easy rhythm of the household. Harrison and Martha had clearly worked together for a long time, and they had a comfortable rapport that spoke of mutual respect and affection. "What is your plan for today?" Martha asked Harrison as she refilled his coffee cup. "I thought I would ride into town and see if I can talk to a few people," Harrison replied. "Maybe do some investigating of my own before the sheriff gets back." "Emma, would you be willing to write down everything you remember about that morning?" "Every detail, no matter how small. Sometimes the little things are what matter most." "Of course," Emma said. "I will do whatever I can to help clear this up." "Good. Martha, can you spare some paper and a pen?" "Already thought of that," Martha said, producing both items from a drawer. "Emma can use the small desk in the spare room. She will have peace and quiet there." After breakfast, Emma settled down to write out her account of the morning she had delivered the laundry to Mrs. Henderson. She tried to remember every detail. The time she had arrived, exactly where she had placed the basket, whether she had seen anyone else in the vicinity. She mentioned Sarah Johnson passing by on the street as Emma had been leaving the Henderson property, and how Sarah had given her an odd look, but had not spoken. She was so absorbed in her task that she did not hear Harrison return until he appeared in the doorway of her room, startling her slightly. "Sorry, did not mean to scare you," he said with a slight smile. "How is the writing coming along?" "I think I have remembered everything I can," Emma replied, offering him the pages she had filled with her neat handwriting. "I hope it helps." Harrison took the pages and scanned them quickly, his expression thoughtful. "This is good, very detailed. I talked to a few people in town, and I learned some interesting things." "What kind of things?" Emma asked, leaning forward. "Well, for one thing, Mrs. Henderson's brooch is not the first valuable item to go missing in Bentonville recently. Over the past 2 months, there have been at least 3 other thefts from wealthy homes. Each time, a piece of jewelry or a small valuable object disappeared. No one was ever caught, and no pattern was established because the items were taken from different households." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. So there is a real thief operating in town. Exactly. And here is the interesting part. Sarah Johnson has worked for all four of the families that were robbed. She was employed by the Hendersons, but she also does occasional work for the Millers, the Thatchers, and the Blackwells, all of whom reported thefts. "You think Sarah is the thief," Emma said, her mind racing. "I think it is worth investigating," Harrison replied carefully. "But we need proof, not just suspicion. The sheriff will need evidence before he can make any accusations or arrests. What about Mrs. Henderson's brooch? If Sarah took it, where would she hide it? That is the question. She lives in a small room at the back of the Henderson house, so hiding something there would be risky. She might have sold it already, or she might have a hiding place somewhere else." Emma chewed her lip, thinking. "When I was delivering the laundry that morning, I saw Sarah coming from the direction of the old mill on the edge of town. It seemed odd because that building has been abandoned for years, and there is no reason for anyone to go there. I did not think much of it at the time, but now I wonder." Harrison's eyes sharpened with interest. "The old mill would make a good hiding place. It is isolated and no one goes there anymore. Emma, you might have just given us the clue we need." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to take a look at that mill," Harrison said decisively. "But not until after dark. If Sarah is using it as a hiding place, I do not want to tip her off by poking around in broad daylight. Will you be all right here with Martha this evening?" "Of course," Emma said, though she felt a flutter of anxiety at the thought of Harrison putting himself at risk for her sake. "But please be careful. If Sarah is the thief and she catches you investigating, she might do something desperate." Harrison's expression softened, and he reached out to briefly squeeze Emma's hand. The gesture was quick and almost casual, but it sent a warm jolt through her entire body. "I will be careful," he promised. "I have no intention of getting into trouble. I just want to see if there is any evidence that might help prove your innocence." The rest of the day passed slowly for Emma. She helped Martha with various household tasks, grateful for the distraction but unable to stop thinking about what Harrison would find at the old mill. Martha seemed to sense her anxiety and kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling Emma stories about the early days of Bentonville, and about how Harrison had come to Arkansas and built his ranch from nothing. "He was just a boy when he arrived," Martha said as they worked together to prepare the evening meal. "Maybe 20 years old, with nothing but a horse, a rifle, and a fierce determination to make something of himself. He worked for other ranchers for a few years, saving every penny, and then he bought this land and started building. That was 8 years ago, and look what he has accomplished." "He seems like a good man," Emma said softly. "He is," Martha agreed. "One of the best I have ever known. He has had his share of heartache, losing his brother the way he did and his parents before that to cholera. But he has never let bitterness turn him hard. He still believes in doing what is right, even when it is difficult." Emma felt her admiration for Harrison growing with every story Martha told. He was not just a man who had defended her out of a sense of justice. He was someone who had known real loss and pain, and who had chosen to respond with strength and compassion rather than anger. As evening fell, Harrison prepared to ride out to the old mill. He loaded his saddlebags with rope and a lantern, and he strapped on a gun belt, the holstered pistol a reminder of the potential danger involved in what he was doing. "I should be back within a few hours," he told Martha and Emma. "If I am not back by midnight, send someone to fetch the sheriff. You be safe, you hear me," Martha said sternly. "I am too old to be training a new employer." Harrison grinned at her, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Yes, madam, I will do my best not to get myself killed." Emma walked with him out to the barn, where his horse was already saddled and waiting. The night was dark, with clouds obscuring the moon and a cold wind whispered through the trees. "Harrison," Emma said as he was about to mount up. He turned to look at her and she struggled to find the right words. "Thank you for everything you are doing. I know I keep saying it, but I want you to know how much it means to me." "You do not need to thank me," Harrison said quietly. "I am just doing what should have been done in the first place, which is giving you a fair chance to prove your innocence. Still, not many men would go to such lengths for a stranger. You are risking your own safety to help me." Harrison took a step closer to her, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. In the dim light spilling from the barn, she could just make out his features, the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. "You do not feel like a stranger, Emma," he said, his voice low and a little rough. "I cannot explain it, but from the moment I saw you standing in that street, facing down that mob with your head held high and fear in your eyes, I felt like I knew you, like I was meant to help you. Does that sound crazy?" "No," Emma whispered. "It does not sound crazy at all." For a long moment, they stood there in the darkness, so close that Emma could feel the warmth radiating from his body. She had the wild thought that he might kiss her, and her heart began to race at the possibility. But then Harrison stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should go," he said, his voice returning to its normal, steady tone. "The sooner I check out the mill, the sooner we can figure out what is really going on." Emma watched as he mounted his horse and rode off into the night, the darkness swallowing him within moments. She stood there for a long time, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was still beating too fast, and wondered at the strange connection she felt to this man she had known for barely a day. Inside the house, Martha had settled into her rocking chair by the fire with some mending. Emma tried to read one of the books from Harrison's shelf, but she could not focus on the words. Her mind kept drifting to images of Harrison alone at the abandoned mill, searching for evidence in the dark. What if Sarah was there? What if there were other dangers Emma had not even considered? The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Martha eventually put aside her mending and made tea, which Emma accepted gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. They sat in companionable silence, both of them watching the door and listening for the sound of hoofbeats. It was nearly 11 o'clock when they finally heard a horse approaching. Emma jumped to her feet, her heart leaping into her throat, and Martha was right behind her as they hurried to the door. Harrison dismounted and came striding toward the house, and Emma could see even in the darkness that he was carrying something. "Did you find it?" Emma asked breathlessly as he came inside. Harrison set a small cloth bag on the table, and when he loosened the drawstring, several pieces of jewelry tumbled out, glittering in the lamplight. Emma recognized Mrs. Henderson's brooch immediately among the collection. "This was hidden in a loose board in the floor of the old mill," Harrison said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Along with these other items, I am willing to bet they match the descriptions of the other stolen jewelry." "Dear Lord," Martha breathed. "So Sarah Johnson really is the thief?" "It certainly looks that way," Harrison agreed. "I am going to take this straight to Judge Morrison tonight. He is the closest thing we have to law enforcement with the sheriff out of town. He can hold on to this evidence until the sheriff returns tomorrow, and then they can confront Sarah properly." "Should I come with you?" Emma asked. "No, you stay here where it is safe. I will explain everything to the judge and make sure he understands that you were falsely accused. By this time tomorrow, this whole mess should be cleared up." Harrison left again, taking the bag of stolen jewelry with him, and did not return until well after midnight. Emma had dozed off in her chair by the fire, and she woke with a start when she heard him come in. "Everything is settled," Harrison said, looking tired but pleased. Judge Morrison was very interested in what I found. He is going to have Sarah brought in for questioning first thing in the morning, and he said to tell you that he owes you an apology on behalf of the town. Relief flooded through Emma, so powerful it made her lightheaded. It is really over. The sheriff will still want to talk to you when he gets back, but yes, I think the worst is over. You are no longer under suspicion. Emma felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them, all the fear and tension of the past day finally finding release. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." Harrison crossed the room in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms, and Emma found herself crying against his chest while he held her gently, one hand stroking her hair in a soothing gesture. "You are safe now," he murmured. "Nobody is going to hurt you or accuse you of anything you did not do, I promise." Emma let herself lean into his strength for a few precious moments before pulling back, embarrassed by her tears. "I am sorry. I do not usually fall apart like this." "You have been through an ordeal," Harrison said gently. "You are entitled to a few tears." Martha appeared from her room wrapped in a thick robe. "Is everything settled then?" "Yes," Harrison confirmed. "Emma is cleared and the real thief will be dealt with by the law." "Good," Martha said firmly. "Now, all of you need to get some sleep. It has been a very long day." Emma returned to her small room, but despite her exhaustion, she found it difficult to fall asleep. Her mind kept replaying the moment when Harrison had held her, the feeling of safety and comfort she had found in his arms. She had never felt that way with any man before, that sense of being protected and cherished all at once. She was also acutely aware that her reason for staying at the ranch was now gone. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, she would need to return to town and resume her life. The thought of leaving made her chest ache in a way she did not quite understand. The next day brought the sheriff back to Bentonville, and with him came the final resolution of Emma's case. Sarah Johnson, when confronted with the evidence, broke down and confessed to all 4 thefts. She had been stealing jewelry and small valuables to fund a plan to run away with a man her employers disapproved of. And when Emma had shown up at the Henderson house that morning, Sarah had seen an opportunity to deflect suspicion from herself. The sheriff rode out to Harrison's ranch personally to deliver the news and to apologize to Emma for the way she had been treated. "Miss Nelson, on behalf of Bentonville, I want to say we are sorry," Sheriff Cooper said, his weathered face sincere. "You were subjected to a terrible injustice, and I am grateful to Harrison here for making sure the truth came out." "Thank you, Sheriff," Emma said. "I appreciate you saying so." After the sheriff left, Emma faced the reality she had been dreading. She packed her few belongings back into her trunk and prepared to return to town. Martha seemed sorry to see her go, giving her a warm hug and making her promise to come visit. Harrison insisted on driving her back in his wagon, and the 5-mile journey that had seemed so full of possibility 2 days ago now felt far too short. Emma found herself desperately wishing for more time, though she could not have said exactly why. "What will you do now?" Harrison asked as they drove. "Will you stay in Bentonville?" "I suppose so," Emma said. "I do not have anywhere else to go and I still need to find work. Perhaps now that my name has been cleared, more people will be willing to hire me." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. "There is work at my ranch if you want it," he said finally. "Martha has been saying for months that she could use help with the house and with other tasks around the property. She is not getting any younger, and there is more work than one person can reasonably handle. The pay would not be much to start, but you would have room and board, and it would be steady employment." Emma's heart leaped at the offer, but she forced herself to think carefully. "Are you offering me work because I need it, or because the ranch genuinely needs help? Both, Harrison said honestly. Martha really could use the assistance, but I also do not like the thought of you struggling alone in town when there is an alternative. And I will be honest with you, Emma. I would like you to stay. These past couple of days, having you at the ranch, it has felt right somehow, like you belong there. Emma felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words. I felt it too, she admitted, like I had finally found a place where I fit. Then stay, Harrison said, turning to look at her with those steady gray eyes. Give it a try at least. If you are not happy, you can always leave, but I think you might find that the ranch is exactly where you are meant to be. All right, Emma said, a smile breaking across her face. Yes, I will stay. I will work for you and Martha and see how it goes. The relief and pleasure in Harrison's expression made Emma's heart flutter. Good, he said. That is very good. They turned the wagon around and headed back to the ranch, and Emma felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time since her father's death, she had a real home, a place where she was wanted and where she could build a future. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Emma threw herself into her work, helping Martha with cooking and cleaning, mending clothes, and taking on various tasks around the ranch. She learned how to tend the kitchen garden, how to preserve vegetables for the winter, and how to make soap and candles. Martha was a patient teacher, and Emma discovered she had a knack for domestic work when it was being done for a home she cared about rather than as a hired servant. Harrison was often away during the day, working with the cattle or repairing fences and buildings, but he always returned for supper. The three of them would sit around the table and talk about the day's events, and Emma found herself looking forward to those evening meals more than she had looked forward to anything in a long time. She was also intensely aware of Harrison in ways that both thrilled and confused her. She noticed the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached for something, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the deep timbre of his laugh when Martha told a particularly amusing story. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and intent that made her pulse quicken. As October gave way to November, the weather turned colder, and the first light snow dusted the ground. Harrison spent long days preparing the ranch for winter, making sure the animals had adequate shelter and that they had enough hay and feed stored up. Emma helped where she could, and she found herself working alongside Harrison more often, their companionship growing deeper with each passing day. One afternoon, they were in the barn together repairing a damaged saddle when Harrison suddenly spoke. "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Emma replied, looking up from the leather she was oiling. "What happened to your family?" "You said your father died, but you have never talked much about your past." Emma set down the saddle and took a deep breath. "My mother died when I was 12, she said quietly. "It was influenza. My father never really recovered from losing her. He started drinking, and he made some bad business decisions. By the time he died last spring, we had lost everything. I sold what little we had left to pay his debts, and then I came to Arkansas hoping to start over somewhere nobody knew me or my family's troubles." "I am sorry," Harrison said gently. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," Emma admitted. "But I have learned that sometimes losing everything is what it takes to find out who you really are and what you are capable of. If none of that had happened, I never would have come to Bentonville and I never would have met you." Harrison moved closer and Emma's breath hitched. "I am glad you came here," he said, his voice low. "I know it sounds selfish, considering everything you went through, but I cannot imagine my life now without you in it." "Harrison," Emma whispered, her heart pounding. He reached out and gently cupped her face with one calloused hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I think I am falling in love with you, Emma Nelson." I tried to fight it, tried to tell myself it was too soon and we had not known each other long enough. But the truth is, I knew from that first day in town. When I saw you standing there so brave and scared at the same time, something in my heart recognized something in yours. Emma felt tears pricking her eyes, but they were tears of joy this time. "I love you too," she said, the words coming easily because they were so completely true. "I think I have loved you since you stepped out of that crowd to defend me. You made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth protecting and believing in." Harrison smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his entire face, and then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question asked and answered. But when Emma wound her arms around his neck and pressed closer, the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent and passionate. She had never been kissed before, but with Harrison, it felt natural and right, like coming home after a long journey when they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard. Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "Will you marry me, Emma?" he asked. "I know we have not been courting properly and I should probably wait longer to ask, but I do not want to waste any time. I want you to be my wife, my partner in all things. I want to build a life with you here on this ranch." "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They stood there in the barn, holding each other close while the winter wind whistled outside, and Emma felt a happiness so complete, it almost frightened her. She had gone from having nothing and no one to having a home, a family, and a man who loved her with his whole heart. Martha was delighted when they told her the news that evening. "About time," she said with satisfaction. "I have been watching the two of you dance around each other for weeks now. I was beginning to think I would have to lock you in a room together until you figured things out." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Bentonville church. Emma wore a dress that Martha helped her make, pale blue wool with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Harrison wore his best suit, and he looked so handsome that Emma could barely breathe when she saw him waiting for her at the altar. The whole town turned out for the wedding, many people who had been so quick to judge Emma now eager to make amends. Mayor Collins himself apologized formally, and Mrs. Henderson, whose brooch had been at the center of the whole affair, gave them a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the ranch with food and dancing and well wishes from their neighbors. Emma danced with her new husband under the stars, his arms strong and sure around her, and she knew that she had finally found where she belonged. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Harrison treating Emma with such gentleness and care that she fell even more deeply in love with him. He had prepared their bedroom with candles and fresh flowers, and he had taken his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Emma traced patterns on Harrison's chest with her fingertips. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she murmured. "A few months ago I was alone and hopeless, and now I have you and a home and a future. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Harrison said, capturing her hand and bringing it to his lips. "This is real, and it is ours, and I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me." "I could never regret it," Emma said, snuggling closer. "You are my miracle, Harrison Rourke." The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Emma settled fully into her role as Harrison's wife and as the lady of the ranch. She discovered she had a talent for managing the household accounts, and she took over that responsibility from Harrison, who was grateful to have one less thing to worry about. She also began to form friendships with other ranch wives in the area, and she found herself becoming part of a community in a way she had never experienced before. Harrison was a devoted husband, attentive and affectionate. He seemed to take genuine pleasure in Emma's company, and he consulted her on ranch decisions, valuing her opinions and ideas. They worked together as true partners, each supporting and complementing the other. As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and new life to the ranch, Emma began to suspect she might be carrying Harrison's child. She waited until she was certain before telling him, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. One evening in late April, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Emma took Harrison's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling with excitement and nervousness. Harrison looked at her, his gray eyes questioning, and then understanding dawned in his expression. "Emma, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am going to have a baby," Emma confirmed, her face breaking into a radiant smile. "We are going to have a baby. Probably sometime in early November if I have calculated correctly." Harrison let out a whoop of joy and swept Emma up in his arms, spinning her around before setting her down gently, suddenly worried. "I am sorry, I should not have done that. Are you all right? Is the baby all right?" Emma laughed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "We are fine. Both of us are perfectly fine." "A baby," Harrison said wonderingly, his hand returning to her stomach as if he could already feel the life growing there. "Our baby, Emma, I am so happy I do not even have words for it." "Me too," Emma said. "I was scared to hope for this so soon, but now that it is real, I cannot imagine anything more perfect." Martha cried when they told her the news, happy tears that she made no effort to hide. "A baby in this house again," she said, hugging Emma tightly. "There has not been a child here since Harrison was young. This ranch is going to be filled with life and laughter, just as it should be." The months of Emma's pregnancy were peaceful and happy. Harrison became even more protective, constantly worrying about her health and comfort. He insisted she not lift anything heavy, and he helped with tasks that had previously been hers alone. Emma found his attentiveness both touching and occasionally exasperating, but she loved him all the more for his concern. As summer turned to fall, Emma's belly grew round with their child, and she felt the baby moving inside her, a flutter that became stronger kicks as the months progressed. Harrison loved to feel the baby kick, his face always lighting up with wonder when he pressed his hand to Emma's stomach and felt his child responding to his touch. On a cold November night, with snow falling softly outside, Emma went into labor. Martha had been through this before with other ranch women, and she took charge with calm efficiency, sending Harrison to fetch the doctor from town while she prepared everything needed for the birth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Harrison returned with Dr. Matthews, and he stayed by Emma's side, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. Emma drew strength from his presence, focusing on his steady voice and his unwavering faith in her. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, their son was born. The baby's first cry filled the room, strong and healthy, and Emma felt a love so overwhelming it nearly stopped her heart. Dr. Matthews placed the tiny, squirming bundle in her arms, and Emma looked down at her son's red, wrinkled face with absolute adoration. Harrison was crying unashamedly, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at his wife and newborn son. "He is perfect," Harrison said hoarsely. "Emma, he is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Emma asked, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. Harrison thought for a moment, his finger gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. "What about Henry? After my brother. He never got to have a life or a family of his own, but maybe this way his name will live on." "Henry Rourke," Emma said softly. "I think that is a perfect name." Little Henry proved to be a healthy, strong baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. He brought immense joy to the household, and even Martha, who had claimed to be too old for babies, could often be found rocking him and singing old lullabies. Harrison was a devoted father, involved in every aspect of his son's care. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Henry when he was fussy, and spent hours simply holding him and staring at him with wonder. Emma often came upon them together, father and son, and her heart would swell with love for both of them. As Henry grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Harrison's careful management and Emma's financial skills allowed them to expand the operation, buying more cattle and hiring 2 ranch hands to help with the work. The little homestead that Harrison had built alone was becoming a thriving enterprise, and their reputation in the community grew. Emma became known for her kindness and her willingness to help neighbors in need. She remembered what it was like to be alone and accused, and she made a point of standing up for those who had no one to stand up for them. Several times, she and Harrison took in people who were struggling, offering work and a place to stay until they could get back on their feet. When Henry was 2 years old, Emma became pregnant again. This time, she carried a daughter, whom they named Margaret after Harrison's mother. Margaret had her mother's delicate features and her father's steady disposition, and she completed their family in a way that felt absolutely right. The years flowed by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. There were hard winters when they worried about the cattle, and dry summers when water was scarce. There were times when money was tight and times when it was more plentiful. Through it all, Harrison and Emma faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. Henry grew into a strong, responsible boy who loved the ranch and the animals. He followed his father everywhere, learning the skills he would need to one day take over the operation. Margaret was more delicate, with a love for books and learning that reminded Emma of herself as a child. Both children were loved fiercely and raised with the values their parents held dear: honesty, hard work, compassion, and justice. Martha remained with them until she passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, when Henry was 10 and Margaret was 8. Her death hit them all hard, as she had become a beloved member of the family, more grandmother than employee. They buried her in the small cemetery on the edge of the ranch property, beneath a large oak tree, and Emma made sure fresh flowers were placed on her grave every week. As the children grew older and more independent, Emma and Harrison had more time to spend together, and their love continued to evolve and deepen. They still sat on the porch together in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about their day. Harrison still looked at Emma sometimes with that same expression of wonder he had worn on their wedding day, as if he could not quite believe she was his. On the anniversary of the day Harrison had first defended Emma in the street of Bentonville, they established a tradition of riding out together to a favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow with a view of the valley below. They would pack a picnic and spend the afternoon there, remembering how far they had come and how much they had built together. "Do you ever think about that day?" Emma asked one year, lying in the grass with her head on Harrison's shoulder. "The day you stepped forward to help me." "I think about it all the time," Harrison replied, his arm tightening around her. "It was the day my real life began. Everything before that was just me going through the motions, building something but not really knowing why. When I saw you, I suddenly understood what I had been building toward. A home, a family, a life with meaning and purpose." "You gave me all of that too," Emma said. "You gave me a place to belong when I thought I would always be an outsider. You believed in me when no one else would, and you loved me when I felt unlovable." "You were always lovable," Harrison said, turning to kiss her forehead. "I just saw what was already there." As the years continued to pass, the ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in Arkansas. Henry eventually took over much of the day-to-day management, proving himself to be as capable and hard-working as his father. He married a sweet girl from town named Alice, and they gave Harrison and Emma 3 beautiful grandchildren. Margaret pursued her love of learning, becoming a teacher in Bentonville. She too married well, to a lawyer named Thomas, and they had 2 children of their own. Both of Emma and Harrison's children built their lives close to the ranch, drawn by the same sense of home and belonging that had captured their mother all those years ago. Harrison and Emma grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces acquiring the lines and character that come from a life well lived. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by shared experiences and deepened by the years. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a huge celebration. There was food and music and laughter, and at one point, Harrison took Emma's hand and led her out to dance, just as they had danced on their wedding day. "40 years," Harrison said, looking into Emma's eyes as they swayed to the music. "40 years, and I love you more now than I did the day I married you." "That is because we have built a lifetime together," Emma replied, her voice soft with emotion. "Every challenge we have faced, every joy we have shared, it has all added to the love between us. We are not the same people we were 40 years ago, Harrison. We are better, stronger, more complete." "You made me complete," Harrison said. "You and our children and the life we have built together. I cannot imagine what my life would have been like if I had not walked past that crowd that day and seen you standing there." "You would have built a successful ranch," Emma said. "You would have been respected in the community. But you would not have been happy, not the way we have been happy together." "No," Harrison agreed. "I would not have been happy. You are my happiness, Emma. You always have been." They continued to dance, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, the music and laughter filling the air. Emma rested her head on Harrison's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had built together. The accusation that had brought them together had seemed like a catastrophe at the time, a terrible injustice that could have ruined Emma's life. But it had led her to Harrison, to love, to a home and a family and a purpose. Everything she had lost when her father died had been returned to her 100-fold, not in material wealth, though they had certainly prospered, but in the richness of relationships and the deep satisfaction of a life lived with integrity and love. As the celebration wound down and the family began to depart, Emma and Harrison stood on the porch of the house he had built with his own hands, waving goodbye to their children and grandchildren. The ranch spread out before them in the twilight, familiar and beloved, every inch of it holding memories of their years together. "We did well," Harrison said quietly, his arm around Emma's waist. "We built something good here." "We did," Emma agreed. "We built a life, a family, a legacy. And it all started because you were brave enough to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. And you were brave enough to trust me," Harrison replied, "to take a chance on a stranger and to build a life with him in this wild place." They stood there together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that would endure for all their days. The ranch would continue after them, passed down through generations, a testament to what they had created together. But more than the physical property, more than the success and the prosperity, what they had truly built was a love story for the ages, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things. Harrison and Emma lived into their 80s, their minds still sharp even as their bodies grew frail. They remained on the ranch, surrounded by family and the life they had created. And when the time came for them to leave this world, they went peacefully, within months of each other, neither able to bear life without the other for long. They were buried side by side in the ranch cemetery, not far from Martha's grave, under the same oak tree that had stood witness to so many years of their life together. Their headstone bore a simple inscription: Harrison and Emma Rourke, beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents. Together always. Their children and grandchildren continued to gather at the ranch for years afterward, sharing stories of Harrison and Emma, keeping their memory alive. The tale of how they met, how Harrison had defended Emma against false accusations and offered her a place to belong, became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And if sometimes, in the twilight hours, people claimed to see two figures walking hand in hand across the meadow or sitting together on the porch, nobody thought it strange. It seemed only right that Harrison and Emma should remain at the ranch they had loved so well, their spirits forever intertwined, their love story continuing even beyond death. The ranch itself stood as a monument to what they had built together. The house Harrison had constructed with such care sheltered their descendants. The land they had worked so hard to make prosper continued to thrive. But more than any physical legacy, what Harrison and Emma left behind was an example of what true love looks like: steadfast, generous, brave, and enduring. Their story proved that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, that standing up for what is right matters more than playing it safe, and that home is not a place, but the people who love us and believe in us no matter what. Harrison had given Emma a place to belong, but Emma had given Harrison something equally precious: a reason to build his ranch into a true home, a heart to share his life with, and children to carry on his legacy. In the end, their love story was not just about romance, though there was plenty of that. It was about two souls recognizing each other across a crowded street, about courage and compassion, about building something beautiful from the wreckage of injustice and loss. It was about choosing each other every single day for 40 years and more, through good times and bad, through challenges and triumphs. And it all began with a cowboy who saw a woman being falsely accused and decided to do something about it, never imagining that his act of justice would lead him to the love of his life and a future more wonderful than anything he could have dreamed. Their story became part of the fabric of Bentonville, Arkansas, a reminder that heroes do not always carry guns or wear badges. Sometimes they are just ordinary people who choose to stand up for what is right and who offer a place to belong to those who have none. The legacy of Harrison and Emma Rourke lived on in every generation that followed, in every act of kindness their descendants performed, in every time someone stood up for the falsely accused, in every home that welcomed a stranger in need. They had created something far greater than a successful ranch. They had created a family built on love, justice, and compassion, values that would endure as long as there were Rourkes to carry them forward. And so their story ended, not with tragedy or loss, but with fulfillment and peace, with a love that had grown stronger through the years, and a life that had been lived to the fullest. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they had built a love story that would be remembered and treasured for generations to come. In a wild frontier where life was often hard and love could be fleeting, Harrison and Emma had proved that true love, the kind that is built on trust and respect and genuine care for another person, can not only survive but thrive and create a legacy that outlasts any individual lifetime. Their tale was complete, their journey finished, but their love remained, echoing through the years, inspiring all who heard their story to believe in the power of standing up for justice, in the miracle of finding your place in the world, and in the enduring strength of true love. Harrison Rourke had defended Emma Nelson against false accusations and offered her a place to belong. And in return, she had given him everything that made life worth living. Together, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something that would never truly end as long as there were people to remember them and to be inspired by the love they had shared.